Mai e te pai maunga, raro ki te kai, mai e te awa tonga, raro ki te awa raki. Tēnei te haupuri awhi ai e taratahi, whānau hare mai e te toki, hongi e hui.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, welcome back everybody. Are there any apologies?
Marama?
Clearly not.
Haven't heard.
Oh, have we had any? Let me just check. Excuse me, I'll just check in. I have had a
I'll just go apologies for lateness.
I'll put apology. Yes, thank you. Apologies for lateness from
Yeah.
Marama. Someone moved Deputy Mayor second. Do I? Councillor Cretney, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Yes. Motion carried. Thank you. Conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest? There being none. Moving forward. Public forum. No one notified. And youth council views on agenda item.
Working through rebuilding the council.
I saw that in that. Moving forward, item 6, completion of the minutes. Taken as read. Would someone like to care to move? Councillor Terry Campbell, seconded by Councillor Lawrence. Thank you. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion's carried. Thank you. And going forward to
With your permission.
7. Yes, thank you.
Bring Glenda through.
Thank you.
Are you going to do?
I can do it. I would. So this paper is around the event centre van. I know this was brought to the last council meeting that you had, and there was some requests for some updates. So we've provided more updates into this council paper. Since this council paper was published, there is a couple more updates that I just wanted to run off. One of the things was around the availability of the vans. So in the report, it talked about the diesel vans not being available for quite some time. The diesel van delivery dates are now expected late August, which means that they would be available November, December. And the electric vans are coming in August, and they'd be expected in August or early September. One of the comments in the report is around the driver's licensing for small trucks is incorrect. The small trucks under 6 tonne, you can be driven on a car licence. We did look at the small trucks, but the small trucks just aren't suitable for what the work is that's required with the event centre. And the other thing was just around the recommendation. So the recommendation for this report is around the approval of unbudgeted expenditure, not so much around the choice between the diesel van versus the electric van. So that's operational to a point. And then the decision for this one is around the unbudgeted expenditure. The reason it's unbudgeted is because the van died, I think, after the budgets were set for the annual plan.
Okay. Any questions around the table?
You mentioned the dates of end of August. Is that this month or August next year?
This month, yeah.
What was the electric one? What was the delivery for that?
So they're due in the country in August. So they're expecting late August or early September.
That's Cretney.
Thanks, Bishop. Glenda, just in the quotes, the diesel option includes a tow bar in the Ford fitted options, but the other one doesn't.
Yeah. So at the moment, they don't have a tow capacity on the electric vehicles.
Okay. Does that create any issues?
No, we don't. Very rarely we would use a trailer with the van. Most of the equipment that we get is in the van.
Okay. Another question just around whether the allowance has been made for a reversing warning with the van, just with it being at events and reversing where there's going to be quite a lot of people possibly. Does the van come with a reversing noise?
That's a good question. I would presume so, being that they're new model vans, that they would come with reversing cameras, but I will check that.
It's the beep, isn't it?
Oh,
It's the really
beeper,
annoying
yeah.
beeper.
And my last question was just around the inclusion of in the let's say the EV option is chosen, the potential for future road use charges coming in. Is that included? I guess you're going to get that with both options, but is that included in the EV?
That would be included in our general vehicles thing, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor, yeah, Deputy Mayor.
In the previous report, at the previous council meeting, there was discussion around how this might be funded, better off funding or general reserves. I see in this report, it's general reserves.
Yeah.
What was the better off funding not an option?
No, the better off funding is absolutely an option. The direction from the previous council was we would use the better off funding to fund projects that had long-term community benefit. So those things that we, for example, like solar panels, etc., rather than something like the event centre van, which could be considered more operational. So we would prefer to use the better off funding for those long-term community benefit projects. Happy to use it for this one if council so decide. But at this stage, we were going to just fund it from general reserves, as we would have done had it been in the annual plan.
Right. Councillor Della.
Thank you. I've got some questions that I have emailed to Glenda, and she's so kindly given me some answers, which is good. But I just want to start off with a bit of a general discussion first. I understand this is a ops decision, basically, on what vehicle to purchase rather than a governance issue. But what I would like to see is, as being a guy that has been involved with several purchases of vehicles, and I'm looking for the best economical solution for our council going forward, basically. So I'll just read out my report. Basically, the report in the agenda is comprehensive, but it lacks detail and recommendations for any alternatives that are cost effective and biased towards an EV option. Anybody has been in business, has been responsible for fleet purchase, would know that when considering a vehicle replacement, all options need to be investigated. I emailed Glenda with further questions. Read this report and thanks for responding. My questions basically related to the amount of travel to Wellington or long distances per year, the estimated total Ks travelled per year, and the pricing for a light truck option. There was also a concern that the distance travelled with the van loaded on one charge. Question, will we get home? So the answers, so the max trips to Wellington, Glenda tells me, would be around about 6 times a year, and the average Ks per year estimated at around about 10,000 Ks. The light truck option, basically, that Glenda supplied a answer back to my question, was comparing a new truck with a box body and a gate lift, and basically they're the same price. So with these answers and others consideration, the investment in an EV vehicle for this task valued at 82,110 does not stack up as a sound business decision to me. I say that I will be voting against recommendation 2, that we agree to purchase the EV vehicle. The important thing in this report is that CDC need to replace the current van. It needs to be done in the most economical way. As it's already been spoken about, road levies and the other options that I haven't pursued much was either buy or hire a furniture trailer when needed. And we have vehicles that can tow that. Thoughts.
Thank you, councillor Dillon. And are there any other questions or comments?
Just comments, not questions, so I'm happy to wait until then.
No, not questions.
I go back to what the recommendation is in this report. As governance, the recommendation is actually to approve an amount for unbudgeted capital expenditure for the purchase of an event centre van. Say that fast. And I believe that's where our decision lies as elected members and from a governance point of view. I have the utmost faith in our CE to make and the staff to make the right decision for what is required. And I appreciate Brian's knowledge on purchasing fleet vehicles, etc., but I think that is an operational matter for the final decision. I would just sort of like to commend in your report that the proposed purchase is actually in line with this council's policy and commitments re greenhouse gas emissions. And also, whilst if we are debating costs between a diesel and EV, I just note that there is actually good business practice having a lower whole of life cost. So we're not just looking at the upfront cost. We've obviously looked at it across its whole of life, which is financially more prudent. But I'd just like to go back and say that as an elected member, my decision on this is actually from the governance point of view, and I will be voting to approve the unbudgeted expenditure, knowing that our CE and staff will do the best with that.
Is there anyone else?
Hilda, sorry that I was late. We agree around the climate change things and the time to move forward. As marae, given actually I'd love a great big diesel truck, that'd be great personally. But given where we are in the world, anything that we can do that is helping to reduce our carbon footprint is about where the marae is going to be voting. So, well, we don't vote. That's just our whakaaro.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Again?
I'm I suppose a bit challenged by this whole process, really. You know, the issue for governance is to decide or not to approve unbudgeted spending. The way this process has been, it's taken us down rabbit holes to discuss the type of vehicle, the colour, that's not my role as an EM. If this had gone through the normal process, it would have been an item put forward in the budget for our annual plan, where we as EMs can see it in context, not in isolation. So alongside income, expenditure, and then we discuss the budgeted amounts, and then we approve X dollars, and then you go away as management and determine what you can buy for the money. I feel this has been ended up in an about face where we're starting at the solution and we're working backwards to try and eliminate things that really I'm not even interested in. It's the approving of an unbudgeted expense. And given that we've just gone through the annual plan and just gone through a whole lot of really, really lengthy discussions around best value for money and things like that, to have an unbudgeted amount put on the table so early is frustrating, particularly given it's a 20-year-old van, which has already exceeded its lifespan. It should have been in the budget, in my opinion. So for me, what I would prefer is that it got reset and got back into the budget for next year, and we go through the process properly. And yes, it means putting up with a dodgy vehicle for the meantime, but the lesson there is that we've got to make sure that the normal budgeting processes are followed, and we're not seen to be having to find 80,000 or however much dollars immediately from a budget that we don't have. because we've just gone through and set our rates based on the budget that was put in front of us. That's the way I feel.
Renee,
Thanks, His Worship. While what Dale's saying makes sense, we do have items that come to the table for us to approve with unbudgeted expenditure. And this is just one of those items, and the fact that it's died between us agreeing to the last annual plan budget and so forth, that's out of what we're approving today. So the fact that we're actually aligning with our climate strategy and so forth, and we're slowly trying to transition the fleet as such into more purposeful, well, lower emission vehicles as such, I think this is a good decision. So thank you, Glenda and team, for bringing this to the table. I think we could have approved or not approved this at the last meeting rather than you having to bring back options. That's what wasn't asked of us in the first place. So thank you.
any other?
Let's go.
I agree, Dale, probably bad timing and everything else, but yeah, I'm probably a little bit dubious about, maybe I'm not convinced on electric vehicles yet. But yeah, like this one's 20 years old, we dump it, get rid of it. If you buy an electric vehicle and dump that in 20 years' time, who's going to take the battery out of it and what are we going to do with it? I'm just not convinced yet that it's the right move.
Is there anyone else?
Yep.
Say,
I think it's something that I've been thinking about a bit, and I really appreciated Councillor Della's time he took to go through his thoughts and the questions that he had. There were lots of questions that I'd had as well with regards to how much the vehicle was going to be used with trips to Wellington and that kind of thing. I don't feel like, I mean, we can only make decisions based on the information we were given. I don't feel that the examples of use justified the cost. I felt like you mentioned the blessing of the wastewater treatment plant and Anzac Day. Well, one we've done, and I assume we only do that once, and the other one happens annually. And I just thought there was a big cost that hasn't been budgeted. And as Dale said, we just approved the annual plan the day that this came to us. And so it just was one, bad timing, and two, I don't feel like it's justified in the cost. I mean, this morning we had a workshop all about how to divvy up costs fairly. And I think the first thing we need to be thinking about is not adding to the cost pile extra things. And this is an extra cost. I'm not going to get into the debate of EV versus diesel. I think you're right, that's not a governance issue. So I don't think that's for us to comment on. I think the comments made saying it fits our climate change goals, well, that's us commenting on a decision for you guys. I don't think we need to have comments if it's good or bad. It's irrelevant. Actually, it's just a cost that's unbudgeted. 6 weeks after our budget has been approved. So I'd be voting no.
well, councillor, well, things will crop up from time to time, and this is awfully early in the year for us to be saying anything unbudgeted has to wait for another year. Well, I'm not 100% convinced that that's a good argument. And I think we just have to take the advice of the officers on whether this is a requirement or not. So I'd vote yes. Councillor, I was waiting.
Yeah. It's got my support. I agree. The timing's not ideal, but it happens. Maybe we just need to look forward and do a bit of forward planning around our vehicle management and all of that fun stuff. I don't care what kind of car it is. If we need it, I support it.
We need it.
Okay, so that leaves, does that just leave me, or we want to make comment?
Can I make an apology, Your Worship? I'd like to apologise the councillor in this position. This is obviously a failure on our behalf that we should have looked through and picked up older assets that needed replacement as part of our annual planning process, and that's my fault. I take that responsibility. So I apologise for putting you in this position. I think what's really important is that there is an alternative. If the decision is to wait for a year, we'll deal with that and we can manage that within our existing processes. So don't think that events will stop and that the world, will collapse if we don't have unbudgeted expenditure. We will be able to manage and we will move on and we'll bring this back as part of the next annual planning process. And with that, thank you.
So just leaves for me. I'm going to say something first. Chair, got the greatest respect for your staff and you. And generally speaking, I'm just very, very proud of this, the ELT and the way in which we manage affairs, generally speaking. So I say that so as not to be seen to be a negative Nelly, but I'm not happy with this paper. And I'm not happy with the policy settings that sit behind it. It's not about, and I don't think we're being asked to pick the colour of the paint, Dale. I don't think, and whether or not it should or shouldn't have a tow bar, what the loading capacity should be, whether it should be, whether an electrical vehicle can handle that. I do note that, but my issue is really now around vehicle replacement policy and how we manage our procurement. Because the thing that stands out to me is the only quotes I have here from Ford. I see nothing from LVD, the VW Transporter, Toyota Hiace or Hyundai. And people point at councils and government agencies that have preferred tenderers. If we have a preferred tenderer process, then I would have liked to have seen that in the paper. If we have a deal with Ford as part of our fleet arrangement, then I'm unaware of that, and that would help me understand why there's only one company in the evaluation. I see nothing on hybrids, and I don't see, and I see 6 pages promoting an EV and 1 page summary on the diesel option. That leads me to feel like I'm being drafted into a position which I'm really uncomfortable with. So I don't know if we're replacing vehicles on age or on kilometres or a mix of both. And so I'm really blind on what vehicle replacement policy is, and now I'm interested in it. Now I want to know, what is our fleet problem? If I look at carbon emissions, and as Jeff, you pointed out to me the other day, the bulk of our fleet can't be converted to EV. This might make a small little difference with one vehicle being an EV, but in the bigger scheme of things, we can probably achieve more by planting more damn trees than we are by buying one vehicle at 82,000. I look at the costs, the whole of life costings. I've done a lot of that in my time, working at 35-year replacement programs. So I don't know whether that whole of life costing is based on an EV versus an internal combustion versus hybrid, and whether it's for 35 years, for 5 years, whether it factors in the disposal of the vehicle, what's its value when its batteries have reached a certain point, what are we going to recover from it? I know whole of life costings on leases, if I Google up, show that they're cheaper than buying, but we know leasing's cheaper than buying. On whole of life costing on an EV is cheaper than a whole of life costing on a diesel if you're leasing. That's not we're not leasing, we're purchasing. So I'm sorry. And I look at the commentary around our climate change. I see words in here like will be preferred, not must be bought, and may consider. Page and will be preferred is on page 21. That's not essential. So for that extra cost, if I look at a vehicle that's worth, what did I pull up? Some vehicles, GST included and on-road costs. LDV diesel comes in the range between 57 and 67,000. So all I ask is that if whatever the decision, it's clear the decision will be what it is. But what I'm going to look at now from here is what is our procurement policy? What is our fleet management policy around replacement, so that we don't actually have to have these conversations at the table again. Management just get on and do what you do, but we will be clear in the understanding of what those parameters are. So for me, it is a governance question raised by the anomaly, and the governance questions really are around policy and procurement policy What is the criteria for replacing vehicles? How do we cost out whole of life costings, which enable us to drop down and say, this EV vehicle is the best buy? You know, that's just my questions, but happy to put to the vote and let's crack on with business.
We're actually not in the recommendations. We're not being asked to
Approve the money.
approve what is purchased. We are only being asked to approve an amount. And it may well be that management might well go away and look at other options outside of the 2 Ford quotes and come up with something even better. The recommendation is only for unbudgeted expenditure and not for us telling them what to buy.
Absolutely correct.
I agree.
That they
Absolutely
actually
correct.
match the one.
Absolutely correct.
Should be management who are looking at Te Airehai's or whatever might be in the background, and they've come to us with the amount that they, of unbudgeted expenditure, they want to look at spending.
Worst case
That's what
scenario-
we're
worst case scenario.
asked to approve.
Yep. So let's go through that. So straight on recommendations. Firstly, someone move to receive the report. Councillor Della, seconded by Councillor Gunn. All in favour? Yes. Motion's approved. Agree to approve 82,000 unbudgeted capital expenditure from general reserves for the purchase of an event centre van.
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Cherry Campbell, seconded by, no, Councillor Newman. All in favour? And against? It's 4-4.
Five.
Five. Were you against?
Yeah.
You were against. 1-2 against.
Hands up.
Oh, 5-4. 5, sorry, correct. No, you're right, Councillor, thank you.
That's all right. I can
5.
count.
I wasn't counting myself.
Wow. You get credited for something.
Recommendation is carried. Those who who voted against wish to have their votes recorded or yes, no?
Yes, please.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jen. Moving forward.
That's very attractive.
And just as a note, I'll take, talk more about policy later. 7.2 international swap deals. Negotiation.
So this paper is brought to you to present or give approval to the Chief Executive to sign our documents to enter into the interest rate swap arrangement with BNZ, or the documents that allow us to enter into swap arrangements. So last year we reviewed, updated the Treasury policy, and one of the changes made was to allow council to enter into swap arrangements as a way to manage interest rate risk. So this is, I guess, the next part of that process. Over the last 6-8 months, I've been working with PwC, our Treasury advisor, and Simpson Grierson, our legal advisor, to set up these documents with BNZ that would then allow us to enter into swaps should we need to later on, as guided by our Treasury advisors in helping us to manage this. So otherwise, did you?
Currently, we are managing interest rate risks with LGOIMA.
Yeah. So most of our borrowings at the moment are fixed rates. So going forward, as we need to increase the amount of floating borrowing that we have, interest rate swaps at that point will be particularly useful. And as we look as well to refinance or to mitigate some of the risks around the Three Waters borrowing as well, that may be also a time when we look at using the interest rate swaps to help us manage the risk. Yeah.
So interest rate swaps are very similar to a home loan mortgage where we fix the home loan mortgage. But with a home loan, your mortgage and your fixed rate are with the same entity. With commercial lending, like what we're doing here with large sums of money, we're able to separate the debt, the mortgage, from the fixing of the interest rate. So our debt will still be drawn off local government financing agency, where we get the best rates of debt. And then we're able to go to the commercial market, to a provider like BNZ, to fix that rate using a commercial interest rate swap. So it's very similar to home loan lending, except the mortgage, the debt, and the fixing of the rates are with two separate entities. So that's why they're called swaps as opposed to not a fixed rate mortgage. And what we're proposing to do here is put in place swap rates that are available for us to use. We currently don't have them. We're currently, as Kelly pointed out, we are taking out fixed term debt with our local government funding agency at present. It's a tool.
Are there any questions? Any points need clarifying? We're good. Thanks, Kelly. Someone to move, please, that the report be received. Councillor Cretney, Councillor Ailing, all in favour? Aye. Against? Motion's carried. Recommendation 2, that the council delegates to the CEO the authority to sign the documents required and to enter into the ISDA agreement with the BNZ on behalf of Carterton District Council. Someone to move, Councillor Ailing, thank you. Deputy Mayor, seconded. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion's carried. Thank you. CE's report.
Yes, a few things going on around there. Look, I don't have anything to update on the report since it's been written, so I'm more than happy to take questions.
All right, on the table.
I'm for a couple of questions.
Hurunui-Rangi.
So in the community events, can you tell me, and I might be remiss here, but what did we do for Waitangi Day and for Matariki?
So we didn't do anything for
Waitangi.
We didn't do anything for Waitangi Day. For Matariki, we did the planting.
Tawhai Reserve.
Yeah, was that, did we fund that as a council?
Yes, that was
Okay.
the initiative, and then we also supported the community one as well. Yeah.
Did we not notify you, madam?
I was at 5 different things on
I know,
Monday morning. It was ridiculous.
That's the
I literally didn't sleep for
we had
2 hours. And then I performed a wedding at Papawai. I'm not a celebrant. They said, we don't care. It's not official in New Zealand. They don't care either. Kia anō. Well, I mean, that's the thing. So I know that we tried to do something by Waitangi Day, but we didn't. Masterton District Council also didn't. And I'm happy that we supported the Matariki thing, but we've got a number of community events that we absolutely do as part of being Carterton District Council. And I think let's do something in our area that is ongoing and enduring for both of those two things. That'd be great. So I guess that was a comment. The other one is about the Over the Fence campaign. Now, the only reason I know about the Over the Fence campaign is that someone went and interviewed Nanny, no names, privacy, somebody I know. And I just need people to remember and understand that if you're going to visit old Māori people or old any people, but specifically old Māori people, that they're going to try and want to feed you. They're going to try that seriously. They're going to be quite concerned about whether or not they've got enough cookies in the cupboard for the people who are coming around and what this is about and what you're asking me about my over the fence. She didn't really understand, but got quite in a tiz about it because manaakitanga means for her, she's running around trying to make a cake and not feeling well. But that's going to be anybody who you knock on the door to. So if that's part of what we're doing, I just want people to be aware of that, that happens. Hilda, that's all for now. I'm sure other people got other comments.
Anyone? Just bearing in mind that the CE's report covers all departments of council. Yeah. No, Councillor Cherokee.
Just on the trails delivery and the schools link, noting that in the second paragraph down that we were unable to secure the private landowner access. That has moved since the scope of the project. Because they've changed their mind once. Is there a possibility that they may change their minds back again to going back to support it, do we think? I know kind of crystal ball gazing, but
We would love to have your support in helping private landowners change their mind about the trail. We don't think they will. I think after the vote, it's unlikely they will go back and have a second vote. So we don't think they're likely to change their mind. So unfortunately, that now means we are looking to take the trail along State Highway, which is really, really unfortunate for a cycle trail to go along the State Highway, but we are now left with no alternative, given the landowners declining our the trail going through their property.
and especially because it's a link to the schools.
It's not just,
It's not just.
We're really disappointed about it.
Yeah,
it's evolving all the time and the scope is changing because it's not just one.
Yeah.
That there's multiple changes and Kirsty's doing an extraordinary job with Steve and Lou and myself to try and sort of broker those conversations. There are some parts of it that are solid, like the upgrades for the schools, for their cycle sheds, and schools are on board and families. And where it's council property and Wakakotahi, fine. But there are a couple of pinch points that are private. And if we don't get those approval beyond just verbal, then we have to change quite a lot of it, the feeder routes, to actually make it happen. So we're still progressing, but it's a different looking project today than it was at the start.
What?
To that, even if they were to change their mind, our timeframes with transport choices and the funding of Kotahi, we can't go back now. We have to just keep going. Otherwise, we're not going to meet our timelines and we're not going to be able to deliver on our project. Yeah.
thank you.
Is there any scope in there for Access New Zealand to assist or to play a part?
Yes.
Have they been involved in the conversation?
Communicating with Kirsty.
And they've talked to the property owners? Is there any incentives they can offer?
I think we've gone past that now.
Yeah.
So because they've come back and they've said no, we had to carry on. We've gone and we've engaged more with our designers, and we've now got to the point where we're going to be going out and next week. So we just had to, unfortunately, the timing has not allowed us to spend a lot of time
Relitigating the previous.
Yeah, we did think early on they had made a commitment or a willingness to have that conversation 18 months ago.
Yeah.
And we've been keeping in contact to that point, but
It's a complex ownership arrangement too, so it's not straightforward.
Right.
Which has added another complexity to it. The spokespeople have expressed a willingness, but that hasn't been supported by
Like a wider group.
yeah. Every day.
Is there a risk to the level of funding? That's
no.
okay. So the funding's secure regardless.
Only a time risk. It has to happen in this financial year.
Okay. Sorry, that was supplementary questions to the question. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Hain.
I just wondered, Jeff, if you could talk to us a little bit about Kiwi Rail and an update on how that's progressing. I know it's an area of lots of interest to our ratepayers. And if you or the working group could give us an update on how progress is going with them and if anything we need to know.
You are correct. It's a ongoing conversation with Kiwi Rail about the proposed road closures, and I see they've actually made a comment, written a letter to the editor in Times Age, following his worship's letter regarding Kiwi Rail. So the process we're working through at the moment is to try and understand the model that Kiwi Rail are using to determine which roads should have the rail crossings or the road closed. And that has yet to provide us with much information with regards how they are selecting the roads. And they have seem to have a deadline of the end of October in order to make a decision. They are referring quite a lot to Waka Kotahi and the rail regulator. So our question of Waka Kotahi was who in Waka Kotahi will look at holistically transport networks, plural, so roading networks as well as rail networks, and where you make changes for the rail network and that has a flow-on effect for the roading network, who is holistically within Waka Kotahi considering those views. Now, it would appear that that's the rail regulator, but of their feedback is they are predominantly focused on rail safety. The rail regulator has also not determined that closing some of the 30 crossings between Featherston and Masterton would make the rail safer. They haven't provided that instruction to KiwiRail. KiwiRail appear to have come up with that decision themselves. So we're just trying to peel the onion as to how they came up with their determination that closing these particular roads would make the rail safer and also not have a flow-on impact on our roading network. We've had one meeting with them that was very productive, but I don't think it was very conclusive.
That's right.
And so we've got another meeting scheduled with them fairly soon. And again, we're still waiting for the information on how they've assessed the roads and also the impact on the feeder roads when they do close some of the proposed rail crossings at this point. It's an ongoing conversation.
Bessie.
It's a little bit like Three Waters. It's really light on detail, but heavy
Strong
on
one.
aspiration. And
Yeah.
we've asked them for the criteria that they're, as Jeff said, the criteria for making their assumptions and their recommendations. And also who makes the final decision within Waka Kotahi, because that's kind of the elephant in the room. They hold two regulatory responsibilities within the same organisation. So if there's two sets of priorities, who picks the winner? And we've asked that for that information. As Jeff said, we've got a meeting coming up on the 14th of August with the working group. But I see an email have come forward from them today to say we really haven't got anything else to add yet. So, you know, if they're having to make a decision by October, we can't provide any level of support or encouragement to them until they give us the very basic information that they need.
My grave concerns, my concern still remains that we're being gamed.
Mm.
And we're being gamed between the two different government entities. And we have no control over that. Being required to negotiate a position that is acceptable to our citizens when we don't, and we're not being told what the parameters are for setting that safety plan.
And
It's an unusual position to be put in.
And of those proposed closures, what ones do Carterton Council have jurisdiction over keeping open potentially?
So Brooklyn Road, it's historical. If the rail line was there before the road, then the railway has the ability to close the road. If the road was there before the rail, then council has the ability, that decision is with council. So in our case.
But I was there before.
You're
That's
right.
right, that's a true story.
So
Yeah.
Brooklyn Road at this stage, our understanding is that is a council decision.
Yep.
Pembroke, Kent, Victoria are with KiwiRail there. So Belvedere is.
Purunui?
Yeah, just on the Greater Wellington Regional Council are doing this whole 30-year thing that everybody want to get everybody to agree to, right? Which looks at housing and coastal retreat and but doesn't say, it seems to be very light on what's going on in Wairarapa. It seems to be all about what's going over there. So I wouldn't mind seriously closing down a whole lot of streets if that means they're putting in super fast rail there in the part of the 30-year plan. And that was the reason for it. And there's a couple of little streets we don't have to worry about. I mean, I'm not saying that to the people who live on the streets.
Well, you just.
We lived down Victoria Street, went across there a number of times, and I could have done, like, to go around it would be a pain in the butt, but it was also pretty dangerous. and was also a freaky out little thing to live there with young kids, knowing that that was just up there. However, what I'm saying is where is the alignment in what they're proposing with this whole 30-year future development strategy? And is there an alignment? Like, they're currently building seawalls in Wellington to protect the rail network because there's nowhere else for it to go. Are we looking at another tunnel and another railway line or another road link? All of those things are discussions when they're asking about whether or not we're going to close some rail crossings now. That should be coming into that discussion, and they're asking us to make those decisions, and therefore they need to provide that information, or we should jump up and down a hell of a lot harder. And lastly, on the land that all of the rail sits on was all Māori land anyway. So the Hurunui would only be happy to take a little tribunal case on our behalf if we want to. Get it all back again.
Get it all back.
There you go.
Amen.
Not joking.
So there is someone advocating for a tunnel, and has so far managed to get it into into the long-term strategy. So there you go.
I think you're absolutely right, Marama. Question, if we have 17 crossings in Carterton, why not move the rail line, further west? Why close the roads? That's a really good question.
All of those things.
So the conversations, I mean, it doesn't matter if they close Victoria Street and still put a pedestrian walkway through there, unless they fence the entire corridor.
Exactly.
People are going to do what I saw a young man doing in Featherston, walk down the road and go right around it and cross through they're not considering it. So the challenge for the working group is to get people to consider overhead bridges. There is one crossing that we are familiar with, Mayoral, where they could, quite engineering wise, they could put a road bridge right across the top of it and eliminate that completely.
Exactly.
Some of the risk. But though at the moment we're not there, and
just
getting them to the table, getting them to listen, getting them to accept these other options is the challenge of the working group and citizens. So my only question on that is, with going back to the trails and the idea and the concept of a cycleway down the side of the railway line, what's the view as to have, given Kiwi Rail's now determination now to reduce all risk on their railway line, how's that been factored into the plan?
This particular trail is on the other side of the state highway, so it's on the eastern.
No, this one is, but I'm talking about the five towns.
Five towns, yeah, there's absolutely a possibility with 5 towns. It won't work for schools link.
Yeah.
There is, we haven't got definite maps for 5 towns yet. We are exploring the options of a trail between Carterton and Clearville going down the train area. So we've had initial agreement from Kiwi Rail to look at that, but we don't have anything defined or put in a set plan as yet. So we'll just work with Kiwi Rail on what that looks like.
Okay. There's a lot in this report. Are there any other questions from guests? Councillor Bell?
Mayor Ron, going back to page 34, at the top of 34, the Carterton Christmas parade. The second sentence, Rotary has asked for support from council to assist with the road closure of State Highway 2. Question to Jeff is, what does that entail from the council? Because I know there was a few hiccups last year.
Sure.
So we do the traffic management for Rotary and for the Christmas parade and for ANVAC.
Yeah.
So what that means is that we support the community events team, support the team, and they do the traffic management plan. The learning from last year is that we'll have an officer on site on the day, and we won't use that particular company.
Traffic management.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah. Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? There's a lot. What people are thinking. Jeff, page 37, Wairarapa Library Service, a review and decision made by South Wairarapa District Council How does our shared service, how is our shared service arrangement with South Wairarapa District Council affected, if at all, by what's currently happening with South Wairarapa?
It's a great question. So our library staff are employed by Carterton District Council. We have a manager who sits across all four Wairarapa library, so the Carterton, Greytown, Featherston and Martinborough library services. And one manager sits across all four, and we share the cost of that one manager between South Wairarapa and Carterton, but the Carterton library staff are employed entirely by Carterton District Council and look after Carterton Library. The difference between Carterton's library and South Wairarapa libraries is South Wairarapa libraries also have a service depot, so they places where you can go and pay rates and pay dog fees, etc., etc. Whereas here it is solely a library. So our library staff are much more they're dedicated to the community and providing library services. Whereas in South Wairarapa, they have to have other skills and access to computer systems. Our back-end system that is used is the same. So we use the the Smart Library Service between both of us. So that aspect is shared, and it is a shared name. But other than that, there is not a lot of shared activity between the two. Obviously, we help out our neighbours when library staff are sick or they need assistance with large volumes of books coming in. So we are supportive of the Wairarapa Library Service staff who need help. I think the review will be a really good opportunity to determine the levels of service that our community require from libraries, and also whether or not we're providing for the entire community. For example, we don't currently have a mobile library service for our rural communities, and particularly those rural communities that are struggling with roads that are difficult to access. Yet we have 4 physical libraries in a 20-kilometre radius, 30-kilometre radius, and that just that's quite a high level of service. And I think I would hope that the review would consider those levels of service and how we might be able to reach more of our community with library service through this. It is going to be challenging, and I think we will be interested and involved, but I think this is majority a South Wairarapa problem. I don't see it really affecting us that much.
It does make you wonder, though, in your report, it's the interim chief executive for South Wairarapa, take a thorough review of the shared services structure, the services offered, and the management of council's library. And I've read that and I've gone, shared services structure. I wonder what else they're going to review as part of a shared service that may or may not impact us.
The challenges libraries to start with. I think shared services in general work quite well for things that you as a governance group don't feel that attached to. Insurance, back office type activities, where those shared services start impacting on things that are really important to our community, like libraries, like roading, like waters, and they are a key part of your expectation as a governance group to look over. I think the ability for you to let go of them and put them into a shared service tends to reduce quite, dramatically. So it will be quite interesting to see what they do with their shared services review.
Yeah.
Wait.
Councillor Amy?
Jeff, on page 41, facilities and maintenance, there's a point there about the foyer being used as a performance space, which I think sounds like a great idea and a great use of a big open space there. My only question is, you mentioned here that you're wanting to set it out nicer and have more furniture to fit it out properly, and that there's been quotes sent to staff. Are we going to have an unbudgeted expense come to us in the future?
Great question, and no, we are preparing for a long-term plan participation, so we expect to include that as part of our long-term plan. There has been a couple of music events in the foyer, and it is a great space. It has a good sound, and it needs a bit of work, and we could leverage, currently an undue event center. looking forward to it.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, councillor Young.
While we're on page 41, the vandalism at Carterton Park and all that, and is it dropped off or have we come up with any answers yet or?
Can I ask, Glenda, so we are, I'll preface it with, we are tracking all of the repairs, maintenance and vandalism that is occurring in Carrington Park. So when we do come back to council in the long-term plan conversation, we'll have data and statistics around what this is costing us. Yeah, it's hard. So the Parks and Reserves team do a lot of this stuff before anyone notices, and it's just part of their day job. But when it comes to the building work, so like broken locks and damage to doors and that kind of thing, we get the event facilities team to do that. So we're just trying to bring those two sources of information together. You know, because a lot of them, they think, oh yeah, it's like this every day, I'll just fix it. And we don't actually know that, you know, it's been damaged and been repaired.
Marama.
Just on page 48, and I wasn't able to bet the thing because I was dying in a hole of hay fever around representation. I'm interested to know how the council felt over a Māori ward. And how do we ensure equitable representation and I guess decision-making for mana whenua in a treaty partnership with the council as the treaty partner?
Perhaps I'll start Manama and hand over to his worship. So the representation review is underway. So we've started off that work. You may have picked up, I sent a note through to yourself and Joel Ngātui on participation in that representation review. There's been fantastic support from the council around the addition of a Māori ward. I think the only question that council was really debating was making sure that it would make a material difference to Māori in our community and ensuring that their representation views were heard. But there's certainly a great deal of support for it.
Cool, that's great. I think the reason is that we, like Joel and myself, when we're able to be at things do, but sometimes I have a feeling that if there is not a voting right for that mana whenua representation, then you're getting a lot of benefit from us sitting at the table. It means that if we're here to give some advice about Māori issues, you don't have to go anywhere else to get it. And so you require, it's the legal requirement of the council. It's not the legal requirement of the iwi to do that. While it's beneficial for the iwi, it has seen a lot of benefits in being part of the council, and I think I've widely appreciated the work that this council is doing in that regard. A Māori ward seat gives someone a vote who has a Māori perspective when they sit at the table. It's not a mana whenua vote. And then if we're not ever getting to address where that sits, then sometimes I feel like it's not actually worth my time. That might sound rude, but coming to some of the workshops and things, because we can input as much as we like into things, but the final decisions about where they go are basically left to how good we input.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, I fully support the process going forward, and I'm pleased the way it's going at the moment. I guess, you know, being Māori myself, the questions that as you and I have discussed, is that what does iwi really want? Do they really want those people to be elected on, or do they want to appoint the people who they know are capable and truly represent and have the mana of the hapu behind them? Because if without names, I mean, if Buck Shelford decided to stand in the Wairarapa, not even being from here, you might get elected, and whether or not that would be suitable for mana whenua, there are advantages both ways, democratically. So opening up the conversation, letting mana whenua guide us in that deliberation is important. The second point is, I think, you know, I'd like to see where we get to a stage, and I know legislation is legislation and the act is the act, but going forward, you know, the best decisions I see at the table are not necessarily by vote, they're by consensus. And sometimes I am reminded by one of my foster mothers who always said to me, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. And you force a vote and you're the only one who loses out. I would hate to see a circumstance where weight of numbers counteracts what mana whenua really wanted, where a longer discussion and more education, more understanding and better relationships might have led by consensus to a different decision. But, we still got to work within the Act. I get that. I've just got an aspirational view that says actually voting is not always the best way to get to where you want to be.
That's absolutely correct. And we've had this conversation a lot. However, the law provides for a Māori ward if and when the council want to take that up. You've acted outside the law for a long time by allowing, it's not outside the law, it's inside the law, but it's weird to a lot of other councils around the country to have a marae seat at your council. And I think that's great, it's forward thinking. All of those things are true. And I guess it's about when we get to the representation, I was just interested to see where we'd got to and where it was going because I couldn't be.
Yeah, support the process strongly. Councillor Lawrence.
Oh, no, I was just going to say something about the performance space at the front. That's just that while we've run a number of events there, it's for groups of 60 to 100. It's much more practical than the auditorium. Much cheaper to run. One poor council staff member has to sit at the desk and just open and close the door. Apart from that, it's a whole bunch more.
Well done,
More of a
poor
practical
council
space.
staff member. That's you, isn't it?
What's that?
Sitting at the desk opening.
No.
Very next, Councillor Aylan.
Sorry, I think it's one other question, page 42. Jeff, you're talking about the building warrant of fitness program that's going through at the moment, the audit. Is that earthquake strengthening, is that part of a building warrant of fitness audit or is it something kind of different?
No, the building warrant of fitness is essentially like your motor vehicle warrant of fitness. It determines whether or not the building is still fit for purpose. So checks things like fire exits, smoke alarms, detection systems, all of that sort of thing to make sure the building is still compliant. Often you can find things, blocking fire exits, particularly for community buildings. So it's a regulatory function of ours that we have to undertake on an annual basis. So we're doing that. The earthquake-prone building challenge is completely different. It's legislation that's a different process.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Corporate services, just a question, where does WED sit under? Does that sit under?
WED sits under economic development, so that's under Glenda's patch.
I'm just ratting through, I went through and didn't see an update on where we were for council on WEDs.
We normally get that quarterly.
The last council meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they'll do quarterly reports like Destination One.
Yeah. I guess the reason I ask, and sorry,
Right.
it's just that since we did that, since our last meeting, there have been decisions made by other parties that impact on us.
So you are correct, Your Worship. So the Masterton District Council and South Wairarapa District Council have proposed to take the annual plan of WEDs back to their councils for endorsement. It's my view of the memorandum of understanding that we have with WEDs that council doesn't need to endorse the work plan. You obviously and should endorse the budget that comes through on an annual basis, but the work plan is something that is delegated to the stakeholder group of WEDs. So I'm happy to bring the work plan back to you for noting, but I noticed my counterparts in South Wairarapa and Masterton are taking that work plan to their council for adoption. I didn't propose to do that, but I'm more than happy to bring it to you if you would like.
No, just the reason, because I've sat in a couple of meetings and that seem to be running out of money. And they've signalled that on the workforce, like workforce development. Skills workshop, people are only budgeted up to June, end of. Okay. No, they've got a finite timeline, based on the approved budgets by the governance group and by the councils. My worry is, are we going to run into a point where, because the other two councils haven't signed up,
Yeah.
is it all going to come to a juddering halt? Will people be laid off?
I don't expect so, because the budget should have been included in their annual plan, and both councils have adopted their annual plans. So the budget should not be an issue.
We're seeking clarification at the
Yeah.
combined council meeting, aren't we?
So I'm thinking particularly destination wrapper, and I'm thinking particularly around dark skies, and I'm thinking around,
Five towns.
yeah, so this is a bit of a moving feast, and we've done our bit.
Yes.
Correct. And we're in a bit of a limbo because other people have changed their minds or not made a decision.
They're wanting to approve both the budget and the work program. And so they've approved the budget, we've approved our budget, and we've delegated the work program to the stakeholders, which is yourself and myself on the WEEDS program. Whereas the councils to the north and the south want to approve both the budget and the work program before they let WEEDS loose on the work program.
Right.
It felt a little bit like delegating.
But not really.
You said it.
I'm not quite sure how to express my concern.
Frustrating.
But when I meet with people who are trying to work on an agreed strategy, dark skies, which was visionary, passed by the last council, this council's put money in, and then I'm being briefed and at the same time warned that because other parties haven't nailed down agreements, this might come to an end. And yet our council is probably the one who's going to benefit least from these visionary, forward-thinking projects that have been signed off. I'd just like to know that we will I'd like to know when we're going to get some certainty, at what point we could see some certainty, whether the CEs are conversing.
I'll pick it up.
And
It's my understanding that both South and Masterton will be in their council meetings either
Today, tomorrow.
Today,
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's my understanding.
We need a government 101 lesson.
Yes. That's when I look at the library, when I look at WEDs, when I look at dark skies, when I look at Five Towns Trails, and I see disconnects and this council making decisions and acting in good faith and pushing forward, Jeff, and then I find other councils are stalled and not moving, I have to ask the question, why are we doing it?
Because we're showing them the way, Ron.
Okay. And at what point are we, do we have to make a decision? That's so. Sorry, I know it's not.
I'll pick up that action.
It's not on the paper, but it's a concern I have. That's Aileen.
Just to follow on from that, can we seek reassurance that we're not going to be left with the full bill for all three councils if the other two parts jump out? There's a clause in there somewhere that says
That would be
have to be in. True.
October. So no, thank you, because that's where I was
You're correct.
struggling to. Thank you, Councillor Aileen.
We can't afford to.
Yeah, fund it ourselves.
Thank you. Moving on. Are there any other questions on roading, regulatory?
Could I just highlight that had 4 consultations in the market. Firstly, around 29 Holloway Street, around the Belvedere Hall, around Freedom Camping, and also around interim speed management. So we will be holding hearings for those that have decided they wish to speak to the hearings panel in September for certainly the 3 reviews first, and then we'll have the 3 reviews. Belvedere Hall, 29 Holloway and Freedom Camping will all be together on the same day, and then there will be a separate hearings a day or 2 for the interim speed management review, and that will be publicised on our website for those that are interested in attending.
So we'll have the hearings panel convened for the councillors, especially those who haven't had experience in hearings, would be advisable to come along.
It's already in our calendar, I think, for the hearings committee.
Yeah.
Can't remember when.
So all people are still thinking whether they've got questions for major projects or for people in wellbeing. I just want to compliment communications. I think the work you've done with the speed review and the returns on that, the marketing has been superb. The results speak for themselves.
Thank you.
Oh, can I just make a comment just around the Kiwi Rail Working Group? I just want to acknowledge the support that council has received and the working groups received since the public meetings. You know, we've got representation from commuters and local people on the working group. Emergency services have been outstanding, and also Tangata Whenua and also GWRC and Nolte's office. So there's the right people are in the room to carry this process on with KiwiRail. So I really just wanted to publicly acknowledge the support of local people behind that project.
Others? Right. Cultural competency. 54. Acknowledging that the treaty Waitangi obligations are what they are. My question is a little different. I couldn't help but notice in our citizenship ceremony and in the rebel business course, and also just from moving around the district, the increasing diversity of Carterton. We have clearly more Muslim people here living here than I thought. I've recently had a good meeting with some people in the Indian community. I do wonder at times as to whether or not we maybe are not equipping our staff as well as we could for dealing with, being able to interact with different people. I'm fortunate in living in the Middle East for 6 years. Not as good as I used to, but I do. And some of the customs and that. Is there a space in there where we could maybe get some support from, we have a good community of Muslims, Cambodians, Indians, Sikhs, Filipino. It's growing. The business community in particular, should we be conscious of just a little bit of cultural understanding? You don't shake Muslim women's hands if you're a man. These sorts of things that keep us safe and pay respect to them as well. Is that an area we can have to think about?
Certainly, yes. And certainly happy to bring that to a workshop, potentially invite some of the Muslim community or the Sikh community to come and talk to us about how they would like us or what we can do to help them and how they'd like to engage. More than happy to do that.
And it might even be an ideal space where we could facilitate with Hurunuiarangi, enable some of these people to gain a better connectivity with Tangata Whenua and get that cross relationships working as well.
I was just going to add really great points. We are increasingly seeing a more diverse workforce as well. So really sort of, those expertise and skills that we can certainly share across our staff from within our team.
Thank you. No, just a thought.
I just want to, obviously we've got multiple cultures living in New Zealand, but we only have 2 that are legislated for equity. Absolutely. And so this cultural competency section is specifically about Māori cultural competency and upholding or giving effect to Te Tiriti o Waitangi. So yes, but have it in a different section. Because this clearly is about tikanga Māori cultural competency that's only just kicked off. We're just starting to go there. So I'm going to say, well, if we're doing this, I think it's great, by the way. I love it. I've said that a million times. But where is our reo Māori policy? Are we expecting that all front-facing staff in our council, including library staff, are going to at some point in the future be fluent Māori speakers or bilingual speakers? Are we asking that? Is that an expectation? I mean, if we're going to look at policies around cultural competency and what we're doing, we have an obligation under the treaty to do this, and everything else is an add-on. And just remind us of
it. that's what I said right at the start, acknowledging that we have an obligation to Tiriti. As the mayor, I can't, I bump into people every day of different groups, and I've been asked to assist them. And I have to be cautious myself because I don't know myself how to engage with some of these people respectfully, and I need to as the mayor. Yeah. So points noted. Thank you. Major project updates, anything at all? No? We're cool? Right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Evangelist, and all the team. Thank you. Recommendation that we receive the report moved by Councillor Cherry Campbell, seconded by Councillor Gallen. Thank you. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion's carried. 7.4, Board Services. Reform update.
Thank you, Your Worship. I take the report as read. As per usual, the water service reform update report is a very small snippet in time, and normally outdated by the time that we have this meeting. So there's a lot of moving parts on that. There's been a lot of work since the report. We've progressed the work on the Wairarapa hub, as that is happening separate to everything else that's happening in the media. We are working together with South Wairarapa District Council, Marsden District Council, and the National Transition Unit of what a good organisational design in the Wairarapa will be. And that seems to work really well at this stage. But again, that we're discussing it at this moment, and but when further decisions or when the reform is more advanced, then there can be more concrete decisions on that. Other than that, there's been advice with the bill where they're making I think the biggest news is that they've given the water service entity the ability to make retentions payments. They haven't confirmed what that is or how much it is, but that was based on a risk that was highlighted to the select committee that councils like ourselves might come at risk of losing key staff to either other water service entities or the private sector before we can actually go live. So if our services fall on the ground before the reform happens, then there's nothing to transition. So they've put in that ability. We haven't heard much more of that. It's pretty fresh off the press. So, but it is good news. Jeff, you want to maybe add to your submission?
Sure. Yeah. It's one of the key elements of the, thank you, Johannes, and I think Johannes has picked out a lot of the really key points that we've got. One of the challenges for councils, and particularly the entity G, which is essentially the Wellington region, is we have no go live date. The legislation that is before Parliament states there is one entity, so Auckland and Northland have a go live date of 1st of July 2024, and that the go live dates for the remaining 9 entities will be staggered throughout the following 2 years. Now, those go live dates will be made via order in council through cabinet. I asked the National Transition Unit yesterday on video conference that would they be in a position to advise the minister before Parliament rises of the dates for the entity's transition, and their feedback was no. So it's highly likely that we aren't going to have a date for entity G, which is our Wellington region, to go live before the election. But we are still working towards the 1st of October 2024 date, given that the Wellington entity has Wellington Water and has probably more ability to transition to a water services entity than any other region. The challenge for us is that we will be first, despite the fact that Auckland and Northland have already gone. They are already using the software package that is going to be rolled out across the other 9 entities. the Wellington region would be the first entity that would be migrated fully onto this brand new software package that we currently aren't using. And so being the first is never desirable. But that is currently looking like our plan. So Johannes, the team are working very hard behind the scenes to make sure that the data is up to scratch. Our asset management plans are up to scratch. We keep our people informed, and that water services that are transitioned on go live date do continue to operate for our community, because that is our biggest priority.
Was there any talk at the LGNZ conference on Three Waters and how our councils can best prepare ourselves for, well, the uncertainty of an election and then the uncertainty of when the go live date might actually be?
No.
Kia ora, Councillor Ayling. The challenge will be that when we hit the election, there will have already been 4 pieces of legislation introduced and passed by Parliament. So that is the initial Water Services Entity Bill, the amendment bill, the Water Services Entity Act, which creates the entities, plus the Consumer Protection Act, which is being looked after by MB. So 4 pieces of legislation would have already been enacted. And there is a process of order in council that will enable them to set the go live dates beyond that without creating new legislation. I think, I don't want to speculate, but the bus has left the station. You know, it's going to be pretty hard to slow this train down, because it has been, you know, the better part of 4 or 5 years in the making, and it's well underway. There are a lot of councils, particularly in Entity G, that don't have a plan B. So they've hit a debt cap, they have a challenge with their rates, they've got a challenge with the asset, or they're losing staff. I think more uncertainty will create a much bigger problem for our communities than actually carrying on with what we've got and tweaking it after it's been implemented.
Just the sounds that National are making during the campaign so far indicate that they aren't going to be going ahead with this train exactly as it is. So there's going to be some disruption.
To be honest, there's more and more councils looking forward to Three Waters than there was at the start, for all the reasons Jeff said.
Yeah, clearly there are those councillors who welcome this because they are their failures to address their own problems in the past. There are the dateless and desperate who are actually hoping for an early election, and that conversation was whistling around and even promoting the idea of a snap election. And I got a text message from a journalist asking me what's my position on that, because our position really hasn't changed. And when you consider that National did all the work on this prior to losing, and then Labor picked it up and carried it forward, it doesn't matter what the rhetoric is. I think the CE's bang on the button. Yeah. The bus has left the station, it's gone, and it's just a matter of dates now and what the structure looks like, and whether or not we're going to have, our people are going to have the level of control and democratic influence that we would hope that they will have. So staff are just, it is what it is right now. And I think
we're certainly working on this before losing, and more. They wanted much more, but anyway, so I don't believe they will change.
It is what it is. Right. Johannes, sorry.
Question. I noticed, I think we know that the Better Off funding second tranche has disappeared. I noticed in some of the local government submissions, they talked about no worse off funding. What's that?
Great question.
Minimum standard.
It'd be good to get a good answer.
Great question. There are some councils that have, like us, high quality water assets. And so as you go through an asset cycle, you acquire a new asset, it degrades over time, and you maintain it, and then you buy a new one and you usually upgrade your capacity. So the intent behind no worse off funding was those that had either Whangarei is a good example, invested significantly in their new water assets, would lose all of those assets and all of the revenue associated with it and be left behind with the assets that they hadn't upgraded, like, for example, roading. So no worse off funding is a $500 million pool that was created for all councils to bid against to ensure that their remaining asset, their remaining council was no worse off following the transition of Three Waters. I am really aware Wellington City Council's claim on no worse off funding is larger than the entire national pool. And that does create some problems. So the NTU are still working through the division of that $500 million no worse off funding pool. They haven't released any information on it as far as I know.
I guess if you replay the speech by the Leader of the Opposition, you'll hear them talking about ownership, allowing ownership of the assets to remain with councils. Still no clarity. I got no clarity out of how that can be achieved and still have a water services entity that's managing and controlling it. There's a lot of conversation about the rights and the wrongs of what was an opt-in option under National's first model to opt-in, opt-out option, which was removed in this model. And there's still no clarity, and I've got no clarity as to how what was presented is going to be funded. So there's still the big uncertainty in there is around the funding, and of course we'll see in time once the entity is up and running what the charges to our ratepayers will be.
Perhaps if I could add to that, I do believe that the $500 million no worse off funding was going to be funded via debt on the new 10 water services entities, depending on their share.
Yeah.
So you'll pay for it one way or another.
Supplementary to that on the water stuff, my only comment to make is that the statutory management of waterways and the ownership of the moana and some control over the catchment came back to Kahungunu and Rangitane in the settlements. When we are not involved in those hui, because it's a hui of councils, there is still an obligation of council as the treaty partner to be asking where that's at. And I'd appreciate that if you are representing and there's not a iwi rep there or somebody asking those questions, that those questions be asked so that we know in Wairarapa as well where we're sitting with that. I thought it was eye-opening for me when Darren Ponta, got his name right, not David, asked questions around Wāhi Tapu and so on of the Greater Wellington Regional Council. And it's just surprised me to hear someone who's not sitting there advocating for the iwi to ask those questions, but actually the legal obligation is again on the council, not the iwi, to be meeting those obligations. So I would appreciate that when you're in those weeks, I see no reference to it in the report. I don't know whether they're saving a meeting as the new water entity to have with iwi at some different time, but I've certainly not heard about it, and I'd appreciate it that if there is some advocacy that's been needed or even some clarity around what does that look like for Wairarapa in meeting those treaty obligations, that would be great.
Okay. So the meeting I was at yesterday, Helmut Modlik was there on. He was supportive.
Do I have someone to move? We receive the report. One further question. Yep.
Just under the considerations, the financial impact, you've mentioned that council's reimbursed for those costs associated with Three Waters. That was the 300,000 or so that we were. I'm just wondering how we're.
Per annum, I believe.
Yes. So in the previous financial year, we haven't. I think we spent close to 20% probably of that transition funding, and we still make use of that funding for all the time associated with the transition.
Was that a move?
I think Steve did.
I think he did. Yeah, he put his hand up, so that's a moving one. Yeah, I thought it was movement. Seconder, please. Now, Councillor Della, all in favour?
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Janice. 7.5, Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act, Taxpayers Union.
No, it's not. It's the law.
Oh, no.
Legislation.
I just don't know they're featuring again.
Oh, yes, yeah.
There we go. Kelly.
So this is our standard report updating you on the information requests we've received since the last meeting. We have a few outstanding on the report that we've just finished this week. Had a couple more come in since the report, so not heaps, but just kind of steady at the moment. Happy to take questions.
Right.
I'm guessing his worship must have had a lot of communication surrounding liquidation. Like 36 days.
I was staggered when I read that.
Was more about the number of days was more about trying to search to see what there is around all of our
And by different
email
people.
search. Yeah, so there's been a couple of fluoride
Yeah.
requests.
Is the responses we give to these reports, are they privy only to the requester? They are available.
That's right, we publish them on our website.
Okay.
So we'll redact any of their private information, but then we pop the response on the
Okay.
website. So if we do get one that's asking the same questions, we can send them the previous LGOIMA, which is what we did in the first instance with the second request, but they've come back for some more information since, yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Cemeteries, fluoridation. Waste. Has anyone got any quick chance, Aileen?
Just with regards to Go Zone, has that been closed now?
No.
Not yet.
Yeah, we're still pulling the information together. I expect
Yeah.
next week.
Any others?
Not too many students this time.
No.
They must have been listening to you.
Quiet time in the curriculum.
Someone to move, please, that we receive the report. Councillor Craig, all in favour?
Aye.
Yes, motion's carried. 7.6.
Would you care to introduce this?
Yeah, look, first thing I've got to say, there's a couple of errors in here. So I think I see these before they go to printed. And on that basis, do I withdraw it or just note that there are a couple of errors? Okay. Yeah, I don't want to go through all of that, but I got to say that Matariki tree planting at Ngā Tawhai Reserve was a lot of fun. It was really good. Thoroughly enjoyed it. A dog pound, I didn't do that. Actually, that's one of the errors. Anyway, any questions? Can I just say that, and it occurred to me a couple of occasions. One, the Local Government New Zealand Conference. I know Christchurch is a bit of a league, and some of us have advantages because we have childless. We don't have children to look after, but can please have a ponder and think as to whether or not you want to attend some of these things, because they're informative, they're networking opportunities to spend time with other councillors, discuss things. I got hit up by Christchurch councillors a lot. I think it's probably because they knew I lived there. And
next year is Wellington. There you go.
Next year is Wellington.
Yep.
If we're still a member.
So pop over for the day or for particular sessions.
But yeah, just if you can, I think, and some of the things that I'm attending, don't be surprised if you don't get an email flicked out to me asking if you'd like to come with me, because some of it's really cool stuff, and it'd be nice to have some company on occasion. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Oh, I have on the emissions reduction one, that's the that you went to.
Yeah.
Is the Wairarapa viewpoint being put forward in that?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because I attended that meeting because all of the Wellington Leadership Governance Committee were invited, and I arrived to find I was the only mayor present. Which left me in a bit of a bind, because then I was being asked to participate in a workshopping groups around all the little tables that had to vote for their names and do little exercises together. And And I withdrew because I didn't think that with the collection of experts and interested party, iwi was well represented, other than Atiawa, who basically pulled out a lot of stuff. But iwi was well represented. They tended to cluster on one table as opposed to dot themselves through all the other tables. Fed Farmers, Dairy and said there was a whole bunch of people there, and I felt it was better for me not to participate in the actual workshopping on each table, although I did sit in with one group who answered in the answering of a couple of questions. I spent my time mainly looking at the process, looking at how the Wellington Leadership Governance Committee Secretariat ran it, and then I spent time talking to all the participants over a cup of coffee at the end of the day, trying to get feedback as to how they felt it went. My view, a little concerned, because the biggest feedback I got was people questioning the parameters that were non-negotiable, which affects your strategy. So interesting, well attended, went all day, but diverse opinions as to how comfortable people were when they walked out. I had some people say to me, the parameters were set so tight, there was no negotiation around them. We're adopting Wellington Regional Council goals as our goals, and Wellington Regional Councils, to pick up on your point, Jeff, have set higher goals than the government has in terms of reduction and whether that's appropriate or not. So it's useful for me because when that paper is finally put together and presented to me as one of the Wellington leaders, I will now have I have a clear understanding of how that paper was put together, and therefore I have now questions.
Yes.
Okay.
I've asked the question for the benefit of the council because I sit on that group as well, and they've asked for iwi advice, and what they've put up so far looks like that, as you've said before, Wairarapa will be looked to offset the emissions for Wellington. And so they're going to get all their savings because we're in a big group together with them. But I don't see anything that's looking at reducing emissions on our side of the hill that are beneficial and, cognizant of biodiversity and ecosystems and the different issues that we have over here as opposed to over in Wellington. And so I boycotted it. Oh, she's gone. Sorry, that was newspaper. I boycotted it because I felt like they're not hearing our voices, Wairarapa, as the Wairarapa mayors and Nanny Francis had COVID. So interesting. So we're having a separate meeting with them because of that, a bit angry with them about not representing the Wairarapa view. I said, not coming to your stupid hui. So they're coming over here. Okay. And I thought that the council, I'm not sure how the council feels about trying to meet that zero emissions target and what are their opinions about what's happening this side of the hill.
I'm pleased you're raising it too, Mara, because subsequent to that, and I've flicked on information to Jeff, subsequent to that, the Ministry for the Environment has put out a new discussion document which discusses a different way of calculating emissions and offsetting and reducing, and that's called Exploring the Biodiversity Credit System.
There you go.
Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I understand already between iwi and others, there is controversy on that proposal as well. So I worry that we set ourselves some parameters, had a workshop that channeled a strategy outline to meet Greater Wellington Regional's targets that we did not agree with in the first set. So
well, glad to know you're holding up our end for us.
Work in progress. Yeah. Someone move that, receive my report. Thank you, Councillor Cherry Campbell, seconded by Councillor Hayling. Passed on that hand today. All in favour?
Aye.
Yes, thank you. Motion's carried. On to public excluded. I need a resolution that we go into public excluded. Someone move, please. Councillor Cherry Campbell, seconded by Councillor Newman. All in favour?
Aye.
Against, motion's carried. Pause. All clear?
No.